So welcome everybody. Welcome to the first session of AdSets for the year, our webinar and workshop series. So it's very exciting that we're into 2024 and we're already talking about February, March and April. So the year's already rushing by. For those who this is your first time for joining us, my name is Darlene McLennan and I'm the manager of AdSet. Really excited to say that we had over 500 people registered for this event. So it's something that people have been very interested in attending. So just before we start, just to let you know that this session is being live captioned, and to activate those captions, you can click on the CC button in the toolbar that is located either at the top or the bottom of your screen. We also have captions available in the browser, and the team now are putting that external link into the chat. We have, because it's a workshop and we're wanting some level of engagement, your camera is on. I think you came in with your mics muted. If you don't want to be on camera, please feel free to turn your camera off. It's just we are wanting some engagement and it's really lovely to see faces. So even if you at the beginning and turned off later, but just be aware your camera is on. Okay, I'm on Lutruwita, Tasmanian Aboriginal land, and the spirit of reconciliation, AdSet respectfully acknowledges the Lutruwita Nation and also recognises the Aboriginal history and culture of the land, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and to the many Aboriginal people who did not make elder status. I also acknowledge all the countries participating in this workshop, and also acknowledge their elders and ancestors and their legacy to us and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this workshop. If you would like to acknowledge the lands on which you are, please feel free to add that to the chat. It's a nice way to start to use the chat. Talking about the chat, just be sure you choose everyone, just so that everybody can see what you're writing. Okay, just to confirm, today's workshop is Accessibility Basics, Building Resources that Support Universal Design for Learning, and it's presented by AdSet's own Darren Britton and Justin Wiley, who is from CQU. Really thank Justin for giving his time so freely to us to do this session with Darren. Both fabulous, passionate individuals, and I'm sure this session is going to blow your mind. So Nelly can give a guarantee, money back guarantee. Okay, this is a 90-minute workshop. Darren and Justin will explore and demonstrate key accessibility building blocks that support UDL in learning resources. And the session is hands-on and sample resources will be provided so you can develop your own accessibility practice alongside the presenters. As I said at the beginning, this workshop is being captioned by Bradley Reporting. The wonderful Lee is doing the work. It will be recorded and the event will be on AdSet in the coming days. If you are having any technical difficulties, you can email us at admin@adset.edu.au. Presentation will run for 90 minutes with a short break halfway through. We encourage, as we said at the beginning, to have chats with each other, with us. If you want us all to see, please press everyone. Justin and Darren are happy to answer questions throughout the workshop, and you can add those questions to the Q&A box rather than chat box, but they'll explain a little bit more about the interactivity. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a great start to the year. I think it's a really, really positive start to the year to do a workshop such as this. I welcome you all, and yes, I'm probably looking forward to this session as much as you all are. So over to you, Darren.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Darlene, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It's good to see the numbers of people that have registered for these workshops. You know, there's varying views, certainly across the sector, whether something like this is needed, and to see, you know, hundreds of people, you know, register for an event early in the year that is on, you know, some of the basics that we certainly believe in. My time and Justin will back that up as well. Some of the basics around accessibility, some of the key functions and principles that we'd like everybody to know that builds on to that next level of making things more inclusive. So we start with documents, we start with some of those basics and building those essential resources for students, certainly across the tertiary sector that we're looking at. And these are the things that fundamentally support universal design for learning, which many of you have probably heard of, and we'll touch a little bit more on that in the second workshop. So thank you, Justin. Did you want to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, hi, I'm Justin Wiley. I'm a learning designer from Central Queensland Uni, and yes, a very passionate advocate for equity and accessibility and universal design for learning. So yeah, I think today you'll find there's some very practical tips that you can take back to start using straight away, hopefully, because it's all these little changes, all these little sustainable changes that we can make a big difference for a really diverse group of learners. So yeah, looking forward to today.
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. So just the next slide, please. We'll just do a quick acknowledgement. And while we're doing that as well, we'll put a quick link into chat of where to download the document if you wish. We can work along with the document that we'll be working with today if you wish to work along with us hand in hand, or you can grab that after the recording and use that later on. But we'll be putting that link up throughout the thing if you wish to grab hold of the document for this workshop. But following along in the spirit of reconciliation, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the countries throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community, and we pay our respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Whilst virtually connected today, we are presenting geographically dispersed and acknowledge the lands from which people are joining and where we're presenting today, which is the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Victoria, where I'm located, and the Bachala people, traditional owners of Gari, the former Fraser Island on the Fraser Coast, where Justin is presenting today. So next slide, please, Justin. There we go. So the plan for today's workshop, it is 90 minutes. And again, thank you for joining. It's a long time to take out of everybody's busy schedule, so we'll try to make it worthwhile. We plan you can engage in this workshop in many different ways. We're saying you can have your cameras on, your cameras off. You can sit back and just listen to our dulcet tones, which may put you to sleep. And that might be a perfect thing for the start of the year as well, to have a bit of R&R to yourself, where you pretend to management that you're off doing professional development. Or as we were saying, you can work along with the document, or you can download the document and engage with this, with the recording of this later at your own pace if you wish. We realise people are busy and you may well be interrupted while doing this with other things popping up on your screen, as we all do in this connected digital environment we now work in. We will let you know that what we're doing today will be fairly PC biased in terms of what we're doing. So we'll be mainly looking at Microsoft Office or Microsoft Word, in particular to demonstrate some of the principles and these accessibility basics. We will provide some links as well. They're in the document for those that might be on a Macintosh system as well. But we were trying to get hold of one for today so that we could demonstrate on both. But unfortunately, budgets aren't what they used to be at various institutions. So getting hold of a Macintosh just for this example may not be there. But we would encourage you to download the document if you like to work along with us as well. A quick summary of the things that we'll be covering today, and these are things around headings and structuring of documents, alternative text, meaningful links and tables, which is things you've probably heard float around accessibility in various ways and forms. And in terms of context of what we're doing today, we're going to be covering very much the basics and the principles behind some of these. These apply in different ways in different systems. So within learning management systems, headings, alternate text, links, tables, all of these can still be done just in slightly different ways in Word. So this is more about introducing some of those principles for people that are there and giving you some hands-on to be able to do those yourself. Just before we do start, we would like to, I'm just going to launch a quick poll. If we can we'll just spend a minute for people to answer the poll. So that should be launching now. A quick poll on where you're currently at the moment. So what is your current understanding of creating accessible documents? So you've got a choice there. I'm not clear about what accessible documents actually are. I know about the need for accessible documents, already use some accessible documents, or I create documents that are generally accessible. So just to give us a bit of a taste of where people are at so that we can kind of work in with that pace with the session today. So we'll just give you a couple of moments to do that. Okay, I can just see in chat there's a few Mac users, so we'll try and get a couple of those links from the document into chat there for you. Just bear with us a few seconds with that. I don't know, Justin, are you able to grab those Mac links and put those into chat, please. All right, looks like we've got 92% of people have participated in the poll, so I might just quickly close that and let's have a quick look at those results. %6% unclear, and not clear about what accessible documents actually are. So we're talking 38%. They know about the need for them. A bit more information needed. About 46%, that's really good. Half are already using some accessibility tools or strategies. That's really good to hear. I'm sure if we were to have held this poll before COVID, the results may have been slightly different. COVID and certainly the push to online teaching that's happened during that period has advanced most people's skills in this area to some degree, which has been great. And 10%. Bravo, the correct documents are generally accessible to start with. So that's a really good starting point. I think that's there. Justin, did you want to comment on that poll?
Yeah, look, that's excellent to see the spread of people and the fact that people are already using some accessibility strategies and tools. And yeah, we can certainly give you some more ideas today and in the next session as well. And for those people who are not clear about it, you'll come out of today hopefully with some, as I said, practical ideas and concepts that you can use straight away. As Darren mentioned earlier, it's not just about a Word document, it's a Word document which flows onto a PDF document or a Word document that's your master that carries onto your LMS for your content. So yeah, these principles apply across a lot of contexts. Now I must apologise, the links I've popped in the chat didn't carry the URLs across, so I'm not sure how to do that without pulling out each individual
and those
one.
Yeah, that's fine. Look, the links are, and John just pointed that out. Thank you, John in chat. The links are available in the Word document. So if you download the Word document, they're there on that front page. All the links to resources we'll be using today are available on that front page. And Kylie's just put the link to the document again, just into chat. Thank you. Next page, Justin, and then we'll get started. You'll hear us mentioned many times today. There'll be one or two things. One, I'm firmly of the belief you can't make everything 100% accessible, so it's an uphill battle if you're going to try and achieve Valhalla of making everything 100%. But there are a few quick things, as we were saying, that we'll do today and in the next workshop next week, which will allow for you to make probably 95% of those resources accessible to 95% of people, should I say. And context. Context is the other one. Context. I say this all the time. Context is everything. Just putting some links up without any context doesn't make sense. Just making a heading without any context doesn't make sense. And throughout the document, we've tried to add in some context because this is a difficult thing. We're going to show you a document. We're going to format some documents using some of these principles that we're talking about today. And it is hard when you're working on somebody else's document that you're not putting together yourself. So we've put in some context around why we've added certain things in, why this link is important to put in this document, etc. But we'll go through those and we'll keep referring to sorry, I'm just reading chat. Maybe you need a Mac to put links in. Very funny. Excellent. But please do engage with each other in chat that we've got there. And if there's direct questions, we're saying, put that into the Q&A. So we might kick over to Justin with the document, and we'll go over the first page with some of the things we'll be doing today, as we're saying, and we'll go from there. So can everybody see that all right? We need to zoom in a little bit with that. Come out fine for me. A larger, if we can, please, Justin. Yep. Excellent. All right, thank you. Yep. And we'll get started with saying, so this is the document that we're going to work through. Feel free to work alongside as we go through and do this. We have got some links in there which you can refer to later, which is where we're pulling some of this information from on the AdSet Accessibility Basics, which was co-developed with AdSet with Deakin University and the University of Tech Sydney. So again, these are some of the topics that we're covering today. Some guides which AdSet has around creating accessible documents and some further information and the resources AdSet has on Universal Design for Learning. And then some specific links around describing text and some of the other bits we're doing, and there's the links at the bottom there for the Mac iOS instructions for how to do these things in Word. But I'll hand over to you, Justin, and we might kick off around the number one thing on my list, and it always is, headings and structure.
No worries. Thanks very much, Darren. So yeah, when we're creating documents, we've got to remember that we have a very diverse range of users, from people who are people with disabilities to people with temporary disabilities, to people with special learning needs or learning preferences, that they want to access things in certain ways that work for them. So creating a document that's accessible within Word means that you can provide many ways of interacting and adapting that document, or a user can adapt that document to their own specific requirements. So the very first topic that we're talking about is headings. And as Darren said, we're going to be talking about context a lot today, repeating ourselves, because that's a real important consideration for every element that you put into your document, is to consider the context of what you're inserting, the image, the headings, the content, the diagrams, to make sure that you're giving the proper accessibility information or the proper instructions, or setting the context of how it's going to be used. So for this particular one, the context is you're putting together a brief article discussing 2 types of farming practices. Now, Darren's picked farming. I think he's going to go off and become a farmer after this, because he's got lots of great information on how to set it up. So what we want to talk about first then is how we actually add headings. So you can see I've got a heading up here for this particular section, and if I double click on it, I can see above here that it's set to heading 1. Alternatively, I can right click on the selection and I can go to the styles menu here, and I can drop down and I can pick a different heading in here. Now, initially, the important thing to remember with headings is you shouldn't skip any headings numbers. So it should go logically from a heading 1 down to a heading 5 or a heading 6 as required, and we shouldn't be skipping anyone. In this particular document, it's set up with multiple headings, heading 1s, which I actually asked Darren about earlier, because it's different to the way that I do it, but there's no one single correct way. Darren's put the headings at level 1 because they're at the same level in terms of context as the main title of the document. If I scroll back up here, I'm just going to go to this one here, and this one's actually set up using a title. We can see that there. And then we have other items, which are heading 1. And then you can see I go down to a heading 2, and I'm not skipping anything. I'm heading down to, and then I've got my information under that. If I had subsequent headings, the next one I would be using is heading 3 under this level, to make sure that it's logical. And that's so that assistive tech users can actually access the information quickly and easily, and build that mental picture of what the document contains. So, you know, I have the affordance of being able to just look at the document and skim to see what it's about. Not everyone has the same access. So providing the correct heading structure means that assistive tech users can get a summary of all the headings and quickly understand what the document's about, make that mental picture, and then navigate where they need to.
So Justin, if you just open up the navigation pane, it'll give the perfect example of that for those that are familiar with or unfamiliar with heading hierarchy. So think of, like, chapter in a book, or an index in a book, should I say, that would give you, a list of here's the chapters, here's subheadings underneath each chapter that are there. So it gives you that hierarchical structure with, as Justin was saying, so 1 is your upmost, then there's 2s that fit underneath that are related to that section. There might be some 3s that are related to that too. And then there might be another 1, which is, so that might be chapter 2 that has some other things underneath it. So you can see from the document that we've got at the minute that we've got useful links is a heading 1, just by the way that tree collapses on the side. Headings is a heading 1, alternative text is a heading 1, meaningful links, which we're covering today, and useful tables are heading 1s that are there as well. So just as a visual representation of what that is. So not only are these useful for navigating documents for users that may be using a screen reader, etc. It's important when documents get converted to different formats, because it will take those and use that structure and that headings to say what comes before what. It also helps with reading order and helps with reflowing information on different devices. So other devices will take this structure and go, oh, this one has to sit before the 2 that comes underneath it. So it doesn't get confused. So it helps in a lot of ways by this being there rather than it just being 16-point bold text that might be added in, or something that looks like a heading 1. Visually, you can see it's bigger than the other text, so you might assume it's a heading, but it's structurally not a heading.
Okay. And just carrying on from what Darren's saying there, you can see here that when this has been pasted in, it's been formatted to look like a heading, but you can see over there that it's not showing up in the navigation structure. So with something like that, it would be a matter of selecting that, going to styles or going to the appropriate heading and then popping that in, and you'll see there it pops up straight away in that structure. And again, as Darren mentioned, going to another document, I've had to remediate and work on many PDFs, and it's much easier to do them in this drafting stage in Word and then export them to PDF, and they're mostly accessible. So it's a lot harder to go in and make those changes just to the PDF document. So jumping back to headings, I'll close that panel, but we will open it again shortly. So these headings here, as I said, heading 1 is the name of the chapter that I'm on. So any subsequent headings underneath there are going to go down a level. So types of farming, I'm going to pick that and select that as a heading 2. And then scrolling down again, I'm going to go complementary farming, heading 2. And now I can see benefits of complementary farming. So it's not a heading 2 because it's still within the complementary farming area. So that would be my next step down without skipping a level, heading 3. Drawbacks of complementary farming. So I'm just going to work my way through the document then and change the formatting styles. Now, it may be that they've already been formatted, or as that previous one was visually formatted to look like a heading, you can just make each one of those a heading. Now, the beauty of setting the structure up again using the styles is that if for some reason you decide to change your layout, or a user, so in terms of UDL, making this document flexible, a particular user says, well, I don't like that particular font, they can actually go in and they can modify using the styles menu. They can modify all of that heading across the document. So they could choose to view the document with that style heading as large, and you can see now it's changed that heading across the document. And again, that provides a lot of flexibility, multiple means of access and navigation and display for people, so they can set their own preferences, which gives them autonomy to make it look the way they want it to look. So I'll just go back and I'll undo that, sorry. So skipping on with the headings, then the next one down here is dairy farming. So I finished my topic where I was down to, oh, sorry, I've set that as the wrong one. Heading 3. Now I'm back to a new topic. So I don't go back to heading 1. I'm skipping back up to heading 2 because it's at the same level as types of farming. I think that's right, Darren? Am I right there?
It could be various ways. It could be the types of farming heading 2 because these fall under types of farming. So maybe they're a subset of. But again, this is that context part of this, and it is difficult doing somebody else's document because I don't understand. You may not understand the intent of the person putting it together. My intent would be that I would have types of farming as the article that's there. Then we go into the heading 2s, which possibly now these are the types underneath those are the heading 3s that sit there. But this is still a perfectly valid structure. It's just about making sure the same information's in or related to the sections that those are in. You can see from the navigation tree that just brought up how that sits together. So you've got the complementary farming with links underneath. You've then got dairy farming, which is sitting at the same level now as complementary farming, because these are the 2 types that we're talking about. That are there, and then there's benefits of those. Justin saying that sits underneath that as well. I might just get as we're going along with this, if people want to do a quick reaction with a quick thumbs up, if people are getting this, or they want us to spend a little bit more time on headings, if you can just give a quick thumbs up. instance. So you can do that via the chat, or you can do that at the bottom of the interface. Yep, and that pops up onto the screen with those. Beautiful, thank you.
Okay, and I've just seen a comment, Darren. Kylie said you can also increase and decrease heading levels from the navigation pane, depending on your settings. Okay, that's something that I didn't know about. So
if
I'll
it's structured, I was just about to get to that. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Kylie.
Okay.
That's a really good point. So if, for instance, Justin, in the navigation pane that you've got there, complementary farming, we do want to move that to a level 2, so that falls under types of farming. You can right click on it, and you should get the option to demote it. So you can move that down, and it's moved subsequently the headings underneath. So those ones that were underneath have now moved to a heading 4.
Yeah.
So rather than have to go and remediate all of those bits, you can go and do that. But again, something needs to be structured to be visible in that tree at the side in that navigation pane. If it's not there, you can't promote it or do that. But that's a really good tip for remediating some documents where something's there. You go, I've got to do this, and then all the subsequent. No, you can have things flow together. Navigation panes.
That's my take home for today, Darren. No, I didn't know about that, and that's a great time saver.
Excellent. So as we go again, because everybody does use these things different, we've put in keyboard shortcuts, we've put in where the ribbons to find these things, and I understand the keyboard shortcuts will be slightly different on a Mac as well. But please do, if you've got some tips on that, share those in there with others as we're going along. But thank you for that, Kylie. That was a really good tip.
Excellent. Now, look, the other thing I wanted to mention about headings, and it's very similar to the navigation pane, but when you're creating the document with the correct heading structure, you also then have the ability to create a table of contents. So if I go into the document and go to references, up the top here, I go to the references ribbon, and I can insert a table of contents. So if I click on that, I get different options that are available. So I'm just going to go with the standard one. And so what it does then is provide a automatic table of contents, which can be updated as you go. And obviously a short document, it's not going to matter so much, but a large document, this suddenly gives that option for a student or a person accessing the document to do that skim and go, oh, okay, I'm just looking, I can see what's covered in here rather than having to scroll all the way through. So it's a very simple process, but because you've set the headings up correctly, it's very easy to do. Again, if I make any changes in here, so if I'll go down to where I haven't worked, sorry, and if I make that I can't remember what heading it was.
These are a 4 now. 4.
Oh, 4 now, that's right, okay. Make it a 4. If you make changes in the document, all you do is go back up and click on the table and just say update table. It'll give you some options, say update the entire table, and it will have now added that, I can't remember which one it was.
The benefits of dairy.
Benefits there. It's added that in. And again, as Darren said before, doing this correctly now at this drafting stage not only makes it easier then for students to summarize and to build that picture of what's in the document, to navigate, because all of these links you can hold control down and click straight through to that particular resource. So from a UDL perspective, you're increasing ways of navigation and providing options. But also as a person who's creating the document, this is also really useful for working on the document and getting to the areas you need to update or to work in. So it benefits the user, but it also benefits the developer as well. So that table of contents then also carries across to an Adobe PDF document, which means that, again, it's making that document even more flexible and easy to use. You can also add a table of images or figures, and you can add a table of tables. So any of those other resources, depending on how dense and heavy your document is, you can also provide those quick links to go and find those resources. So you can imagine a student in maybe some sort of statistics unit in a big document wanting to find a particular graph or a display. Having that table of figures or images means that they can quickly navigate to that image to find it. So you're making things easier to navigate for both you and the student.
Yeah, and even for, it's a good tip for students as well. I've certainly had some students that have pointed out, do they use the navigation pane if they've gotten something which is accessible, whether that's the bookmark pane in PDF or if they've got Word documents, which are quite long, because you can navigate via the navigation pane, hence why it's called that. So you can click on a link and go straight to that part of the document rather than scrolling and scrolling and scrolling to find, what you may be after that's in there. So it's just a nice little way to, quickly go through and grab or go directly to the section that somebody might be after. So again, it's about reducing some of that cognitive load, looking at just the tech tree or the hierarchy that's there, and then jumping forwards and backwards to the information that you're after. Small documents maybe not so useful. Big documents certainly useful, and I'm sure you can appreciate. I've had some students receive a 600-page book from a publisher that has no headings and no structure at all. 600 pages of text. How do you find what you're after in amongst that? The page numbers aren't structured, so you can't find anything. You can't find a heading marker. The other important thing with headings, again, just going to jump into context kind of thing. Thinking again of that book example, you might have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. How useful is that? It's interesting to know it's chapter 1 comes before chapter 2, but why not actually put some text in there that has meaning? What is chapter 1 about? And we see this quite often, transferring this heading structure across to learning management systems. So in the LMSs at our various institutions, you may have seen unit sites, etc., that might have week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, which is fine as a student going through in a very linear fashion. Well, this is what's next. If I need to go back and find where something was, the weeks don't tell me anything. Week 2, well, what was in week 2? I don't know. I've got to go there to explore it. So if it said week 2, cellular reproduction as a heading for week 2, that makes much more sense. So again, you're putting context in to those headings, which can make all the difference. Again, you look at the tree, and if you've got multiple things called exactly the same heading, this applies to then websites. If you've got a lot of things just called information, and you've got 10 of them, which one do you click on? They're all rank exactly the same with the same info. So putting that little bit of context and meaning behind things can make all the difference. And this will come up again as we get to links. Might just quickly pause. We'll quickly look at a couple of the questions before we move on to the next section that's there. So what have we got? We should set a title as a H1 rather than title. Very good, exactly. Justin asked me exactly the same thing, why I'd put into this document a title for the document, and then H1. I've always put H1s, not titles, because I find them all the time. H1s, a title doesn't come up as a navigation point necessarily, so yes, so that would be good to put that as a heading. Instead, although headings and titles are similar, they are distinct. Yeah, title leads the entire document, captures the content in 1 or 2 phrases. A heading leads only to a chapter or a section. Yep, exactly. Good point, Deborah. Thank you for that. Alexandra, you're asking, can we show that again? Which bit specifically to show?
When you demonstrated you said, you showed us how you can apply different heading styles. And you said something about, I just missed how you get to table of contents. Is it, I can see on the left-hand side now, table of contents. So
So basically, if you put your cursor, so I'll just take this one out. How do I delete that?
I think I had my head down for a minute. I was writing.
That's all right. No worries. Look, I'll insert another one. I'll just pop my cursor in there and then go to the references ribbon. And then over on the left there, it's table of contents. There's some different styles there. And then if I insert that,
so what do you
already one there.
Okay. All right. I've got a Mac, but it should be similar. All right. So, but you do have to go to references first and then table of contents. Okay. No worries. Thanks.
And you'll notice as you went over that table of contents, that it is reinforcing, like even in just the little drop down, sorry, Justin, to the table of contents button that's there. No, sorry, on the ribbon itself. You'll notice the various styles that it has that structure in there of heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. On the first one, heading 1, heading 2. So it's reinforcing that this is how it's building that navigation. So as we say, 16-point bold does not a heading make. It should still be an actual structured as a heading using the heading styles.
So which one should you choose? You know how you get automatic table 1, like which one would you?
Well, these are based on the headings that I've selected. So these are all already set up. So I've made that choice of setting this one as a heading 1, and I've set this one as a heading 2.
But then when you
that gets carried across.
Yeah, in that drop down. Sorry, I think that's
how you
referring
went
to.
from references to table of contents, and then you've got 3 choices. Which one do you choose?
That's
Oh,
personal
which-
preference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whichever
Look,
suits your.
they're just different styles. Yeah,
Okay,
they're just
so it
styles.
doesn't matter. It
No.
won't affect accessibility. That's
No,
all.
exactly.
No,
It might
no.
just be if you've got a very large document that might be in a 100-page guidebook or something that's got all of these things in, you may want to not have heading level 3s available so that you're just really condensing this list to the key information. Or it may just be I only want to display heading 1s because there's 12 of those already and I don't want 5 pages of an index, which again makes the index then unwieldy. So there's different ways to do it and to style that to what you may want that to be. So they all apply the same principles. It's just how they then look from that and what level you
And
want.
there is an option to do customizing table of contents as well, but I've never touched that. I always use the standard ones.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Have we got any more questions there, Darren?
Yes, work.
Oh,
Describe
Google
table
Docs.
contents work in Google Docs the same way.
I'm going to show my ignorance here. I don't use Google Docs. So if anyone has a
Somebody's put an
to
answer
that,
right there with the YouTube video around that.
oh, sweet. Thank you, Deborah.
And Kylie asks, is there a specific setting to exclude the title from the table of contents? I've never seemed to exclude in my documents. And John's answered that one. This is great. People are answering these things. Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's having a knowledgeable group here. Use the separate style for the table of contents heading based on heading 1. Yeah. So that you can, if you wish to include that, you can still make something that's a heading 1 in terms of style in the background, but that you're using to be the title of the document to make it look a particular way, etc. That's there. But excellent, that's good. Alexander's asking, can you show? Okay, yeah, we just got that. Navigation pane. The navigation pane. Yeah, I always leave the navigation pane open. I'm the same, Jason. I can't navigate a document without it. I've just gotten so used to having it visible. That's there. Talitha, is that right? Sorry, Justin.
I was just going to ask Darren. Now, I always do the search for that. Where does it live? Where does navigation live under which ribbon?
It's on the home tab. There's a shortcut as well, which I can't remember off the top of my head. Navigation's hang on, what's that? View, sorry, under the view panel, right there in the show. Slightly left here. So you got your all the grid lines and navigation pane. So it's under the view ribbon.
View.
You can view the navigation pane.
Excellent.
Something in my head says it's Control K, but I don't think so. Windows K, something like that. I could be completely wrong. Nope.
No.
Control plus F.
Sorry, Ruth.
Control.
Sorry, I just put it in the chat. Control plus F.
F, yes. Excellent, thank you.
Oh, what am I doing? Right, thank you. Control F. Excellent.
Yep. So that gives you navigation pane, which has results, headings, pages. So there's various subheadings underneath that. All right. We spent 40 minutes on headings, which is important because headings are one of those top things. So I might just quickly move on from those, and we'll post some of these when we get these videos up online. The responses people have got into chat up there as well for navigating some of these. So I might quickly move on to our next part of this, which is where we can get some interactivity as well, because we're going to ask everybody to spend a little bit of time doing this. So we're talking about alternate text for images. So over to you, Justin.
Okay, thanks, Darren. So again, thinking of our users for both people with accessibility requirements, assistive tech, but also people who will be accessing in diverse ways, it's important that we explain the context and explain an image using alternative text so that the ideas can be accessed equitably by everybody. So in this particular image, you've added the following 2 images to your types of farming documents. So what we want to then consider is how can we explain these images if they're required. So the very first thing is to analyze and say, look, are these images something that needs to be explained? Do they add to the information that's being the information of the document, to the content, or are they just decorative? So if they're decorative, you can just mark it as decorative in the same way that you do it in a LMS or anything like that. You can right click on the document and you can, on the image, sorry, select it, right click and go view alt text. And then we've got an area over here in our alt text panel where we can add in a very concise and brief description to explain the image or to explain the image in context in particular. Now, if it's just decorative, you can just mark it as that, and then assistive tech won't look at it. They won't read anything out. So that's not going to disadvantage an assistive tech user by hearing stuff that's not important or announcing the image. But if it is something important, you have the option of generating alt text for me, which is not necessarily the best results, but it might give you a starting point. If I look down here, Darren, when you put these ones in, this was the automatic one, wasn't it, Darren? I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's just a baby cow drinking milk from a bottle. So yes, it's got part of the image, but it's missed the other part of the image of the cows all going down to probably to be milked in the barn or something like that. So you can see here there's a description of how to write alt text, but it is a art. And it's something that, you know, I've chopped and changed the way I do it over time and got better, but it's still something that I'm learning every day. So with the document, as I explained, so we right click on the image and click alt text, and we can also, you know, this other way, select the picture, select a picture format ribbon. So picture format up here, it's appeared. And then alt text is right here in the middle. So we can also select that way as well. But Darren, I might throw to you in terms of the Poet tool and the great descriptions.
So there's a couple of links that we've included in there. I don't know when to quickly bring up the Poet tool. Just on the web page. This is a fantastic tool for those that aren't really that familiar with adding alternate text. So there's a link from the document. Takes you off to the diagram center, which said this, and the how to describe images, which is that little section in the middle. If you click on how to learn how to describe images, there's a link there. I won't get you to play through this too much at the minute, but it takes you through the steps, and again, here they've got context is key. It's all about the context. You could spend 10 pages describing an image, but why is it there? What do you want the user to take from that image? If it is just decorative markers as such, if not, make it meaningful that you put that. So this is a really good place to go and practice some of those. So they've got little examples all the way down this page. So about that context, then considering your audience. Justin, if you could just scroll, then the, then be concise. So concise, maybe this is an example here. So we'll have a look at the example that they give and how to create these. So if we open up that example, it has a pop-up window that gives you some of that information. More is not better. Don't repeat information present in the document, etc. Instead, direct readers to existing descriptions where available. Include color only if it's significant. Arbitrary colors assigned for things. Avoid introducing new concepts. So the figure is the orbiting planets of the solar system, etc. And the context is it's a photograph and captions that are in a 5th grade science textbook. So again, this is important. You know, so this is the context is that these captions that are found in the 5th grade science textbook in a section. So if we just go next, so this tests your own knowledge with things, and it comes up with what would be the best description for that. So you can test your own understanding of this. So in that sense, we've got 3 options. Figure 1.1. Would be an option. Option 2, the sun and planets that make up our galaxy. The orbiting paths are presented by a dark orange line for Mercury, yellow line for Venus, green line for Earth, red line for Mars, light line, etc. Or option 3, which is the sun and planets are in order from their distance from the sun. Pluto, previously known as the 9th planet of the solar system, is considered a dwarf planet. Classification took place in this. So what would you think might be the best one to pick there? 1, 2, or 3? What's the context, since this is a photograph and caption found in a 5th grade textbook? And there's no wrong answers. That's a good thing about this, because we keep learning while we do this.
You can pop your numbers in the chat if we get a general consensus.
A lot of people putting in 3s, 3s, 3s. Is it 2 question mark? 2, maybe 1. Lots of 3s. All right, let's try number 3. Description is accurate, presents facts some readers may find interesting, but new information should not be introduced. So again, this was something about context in the other bit. So we've introduced new stuff about the declassification of a dwarf planet and things that's in there that just isn't relevant to why this image was there, etc. So, yep, number 2 is overly detailed.
So again, that says that extra detail, which is not necessary. Now, I would have picked both of these. I would have picked both of those as being the option.
Yep. And again, so it gives you a big, they're saying the accompanying caption provides sufficient information about the photograph because that information was there. If that information below the photo wasn't there, the one that says the orbiting planets, that's probably the best description for this image because it's simple, it's succinct, it says exactly what it is in the context of what this is. It was just a photograph found in the 5th grade textbook. That was there to demonstrate the solar system. Without the colors are really purely visual to show the orbit paths. If we were talking about orbit paths of the planet, that might be a different thing. Sorry, Justin.
And Darren, am I right in thinking that because this is already mentioned in the text in the document, that's saving it from repeating for an assistive tech user? So they're just getting figure 1.1, but they're actually going to be able to access this information anyway. So it's just going to make it a better process and not hearing the same things twice.
Yeah, Finn's asked a similar thing, just as what you were mentioning then, and that's around, she'd put it in the body of the text or in the alt text as well. Sometimes you can put alt text in, which is certainly very useful for those that might be using screen readers, etc., that are there, but adding it also into the body text helps everybody. But you don't want to necessarily repeat what's there. You can, in the image description, say further information is available below the image, so that I'm not missing out on anything that's there, that you can let people know that that's still there. Jin, is it? You've got a question, you've got your hand up? Not hearing anything. Microphone's not coming through. No, we're not getting the microphone through. That's right. I might just move on for a minute. There's a couple of things around text. Alison's asking again, would the color of the text certainly be useful for colorblind people? Again, it's the context. If that colors is there, part of that image was to represent orbit paths, and that's what the article was talking about, then yes, it's vital that you put some of that information in. If this was just his representation of the solar system, again, coming back to that, context is king. What's the information that's necessary without adding new information that, again, might add on top and confuse other people that are in there. So just quickly, just stepping back from this, because we don't want to get too lost into this site, because you could be here for hours, and it's a really good site to play with, to have a look, to test your own knowledge and to challenge things. It is a difficult area, doing images, from simple images up to very difficult images, etc. So we might skip off that altogether, Justin, just purely for the sake of time, because it is a rabbit hole, and it's probably one of the more complicated sections people certainly get are lost in. But what we'd like to do, just for a couple of minutes, we'll give you a couple of minutes thinking time, and we might get that maybe to describe, we'll get everybody just to put into text what they might do as an image description, or the alternate text for that second image that has the cow with the drinking bottle. There was a recommended by AI, which probably maybe shows some of it, but in the context of these images, we're adding these in against the various section, and this is an image that we're adding in against the types of farming for dairy farming. So if you want to, might just play music for a minute or two, while everybody just has a bit of a think about an image description they might write for this second image. Again, no right or wrong here, so please feel free to be brave. Shorter, brevity is often good with these descriptions, we're saying, and keep it relevant to the fact this is about dairy farming. Yeah, let's see what people come up with. Have a couple of minutes. Just noting that Amelia put in mark as decorative. Yes, in a lot of cases, these could easily be decorative, Amelia. But I did give specific, for this one, we do want some descriptions for these because we're thinking they are relevant in the context of this. But yes, more often than not, you would probably mark these just as decorative. They're not really adding the information that's not maybe already there in the text. Some really good image descriptions coming up in here, which
Absolutely.
is fantastic. Yep, dairy cows. Peter's got dairy cows walking towards milking barn. Is one half of the image that's there. Robin, I think this is a nice one. 2 images. One is a baby cow drinking milk from a bottle. The second is of a farm landscape with a barn in the midground and cows with full udders walking towards that barn. Sums it up perfectly. Yep, Margaret's on the same line. There's a lot of those, calf drinking, an image of cows in a field walking towards the barn.
Now someone's put illustration of. Now I think I started doing things like that, saying photo of, image of, things like that. I don't know if you necessarily need to use image of more than just the description. Is that right, Darren?
Again, depending on the context, in the illustrations, fine. These are, in the sense, I would probably be putting these are AI renders. We've got a source thing in here. These have just been rendered by AI. With these, so again, a rendered picture of, or again, an illustration, I think it's fine to put those in. It's just repeating, which can be problematic for somebody. An image of, when it's obviously it's an image to start with, or a photo of, when it's just a photo. That can be certainly useful if we're talking about the person whose photo it might actually be inside the PowerPoint that we've got. The photo, which I didn't do at the start, describes me as a white middle-aged man with short hair, black rimmed glasses, and white beard. That's there, and Justin's very similar, so we could be confused for the same person if that was the only descriptions that were there. Maybe our hair length might be the distinguishing feature that's there. Just looking back at this, left panel cow milk, but everybody's doing a pretty good job with these. Image on the left shows cows walking towards. Yep, perfect.
And Darren, can I say that the excellent process that's happening right now is that people are analysing and thinking about the context of the image, and that's the really important thing to take from this. Is when we put things into resources, what's the purpose of them? Do they need to be there? Is it just decorative, as someone said earlier? If it's meant to be there to help understand or explain or make something clearer, then having that process of actually reflecting and analysing is really important, and it becomes second nature. So you might start taking a bit longer to do these at the beginning, but over time you'll sort of have some certain turns of phrase that you'll use, and it'll become second nature.
Yeah. I'm loving. I just got down to Leopold. One in there. This image is a split view with 2 different scenes relating to cows. On the left, there's a close-up of a baby cow, a calf being hand-fed with a bottle. The calf has brown and white patches on its fur, and its eyes convey a sense of calmness and trust. On the right, there's a scenic countryside view showing a herd of cows walking towards a path, towards green pasture, towards a red barn. The background reveals a panoramic view of distant mountains under a clear view. I want to move to this farm now, suggesting a tranquil rural setting. The overall context is that of an agricultural life and the nurturing of livestock. Yeah, look, sums it up to a T. It's probably longer than I would certainly write, Leopold, but I think there's nothing wrong with that either. That perfectly encapsulated that. If you couldn't see the image, that's given all the detail for that, and given a bit of that setting as well. So also saying no right and wrong. There's lots of replies in this for this. Yes, I think everybody's on the same path. This is brilliant.
It is.
Well done,
Excellent.
everybody. Well done. I'm just going through the questions. John, fantastic. You're jumping in and answering a lot of these questions for people, which is brilliant. Really appreciate that. Yes, sticking to 125 character limit for your alt text descriptions is probably a really good way to go, especially if you're putting these things online. As I was saying, brevity is key. If there is something that's more there, you can always put it in as the image description below the image, or the figure description, which is certainly worth doing, because then everybody can get that information that's there. yeah, so again, context as to what you're putting those in there for. I'm just looking, lots of questions in the Q&A, but most of those have kind of been answered, so I'm not going to focus too much on those, and we'll get to the links section as people are wandering back from their break, etc. We might continue. Yeah, it's just after 2 o'clock here local time for myself. So we've got 30 minutes left to go. Hopefully everybody's had a quick top up. We might jump back to the document and move into the next section for this, which and Justin did have his screen on during that break, which is fantastic. See, live doing things. We're trying to switch between multiple documents and things.
And thank you for those people telling me I was sharing my team screen. Thank you.
It's very nice. All right, so we're moving on to links. Again, one of these things that it's worth practicing and doing. And there was a good point maybe it was John again, put something in there about the, practice doing image description, even if it is decorative, unless it's just absolute decorative, it doesn't mean anything at all, because it's a good habit to get into. How do I describe this image? Practice makes perfect with that, and you become quite fluent in a short amount of time if you're doing it with most of the images that are there.
Darren, can I just say, Brooke just popped in a message saying that they implemented a 125 character limit. I think it's great as a team. So whatever your discipline, whatever your work area, is that yes, if you set up a guide or a process for your particular environment and then follow that, that's perfect if everyone's consistent. So it may not be completely, it may be different from someone else's approach, but having it consistent within your own organisation or team is a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, lots around images. We might even do just a separate workshop just on images at some stage. John's even running some stuff around, putting in attributions and copyright. But again, I would make that available to everybody. If we're putting in that this is an AI generated image, etc., then you put it into the main document so that everybody's aware of what this is. Most sighted users probably won't go in and look at the alt text necessarily on an image, so we don't want to be giving, we want to be giving equitable information across the board that's there. All right, so moving quickly on to meaningful links. We've all pasted links, we've all done these. These can be a little bit of an art of putting these in as well. So I'll throw it to you, Justin.
Thank you, Darren. So yes, meaningful links, very important term. So we've all seen URLs that have been pasted in that are just HTTPS and then sometimes all sorts of symbols, maybe multiple lines to a link. We want to make sure that somebody can see from the link itself the purpose and the type of resource that they're going to be accessing, or the name of the resource that they're going to be accessing. It just makes it easier to navigate and to understand. And again, there is a bit of an art, like alt text, in picking something that's appropriate. We all would have seen things like click here, read more, things like that, which don't give any context, don't give any explanation as to what's coming. So somebody has to actually navigate there, find out that they either needed it or didn't need it, and then go back to the main document. So you're disadvantaging people, all users really, by doing that. So it's important to make sure that you give a link a meaningful name that is descriptive and explains the purpose or the type of resource. So in this particular context, we've added the following links in our types of farming document, and we want to update the links to be meaningful. So the way that we do that is that we can select a link. We can select a link, and then we can right click on it, and you can possibly just right click on it actually. I'm just going to double check that. There we go. So we can go right click on the link, and we can go in and we can edit it. And then what we have is the text to display up here in the top, and that's what a student or someone accessing the document is actually going to see. And then down the bottom, we have the URL, which is the web address that we don't necessarily need to see and can be very confusing. So what we're talking about is making sure that the text to display is something that's meaningful. So if I cancel that, and so this is a link for dairy farming section as a resource that provides information on employment and rewards for dairy farming and the model code of practice. So what I might do is, again, I'm not familiar with this, so I'm going to click on that link. and I'm going to have a look at what we're going to be going to. So we've got people in dairy, share dairy farming, model code of practice. So we can get some ideas then of what we're actually going to be linking to and how we should describe it. So Darren, what was your thoughts in terms of that particular one? So again, I'll click on it, right click on it, and I'll go edit hyperlink.
For the context of this is, the context that I've kind of put there in that first one. So this link's related to that. So I would always suggest that they're not just links on their own. They go in the context with some text that's there. So in terms of this link being there, it's there for the context that we put above. So, for more information, it might be for more information on the employment and rewards for dairy farming. And that might be the part. So let's go into, let's write, so that link is around, sorry, I just need the context. Can you just move the box slightly?
Oh, sorry, Darren, yeah.
Yep, so the actual link itself would probably be, because this is off to the People in Dairy website on, what's the information? Sorry, I'm just looking on that. Employment rewards for dairy farming and a model code practice.
So this one here, the same, that one there.
Yep,
so I'll just copy that.
Yep, it could just be employment rewards if that was the context of why we're putting this link in.
Select that, place it.
And then you might have text that's before that saying, the following resource, or the resource from the Dairy Australia. Has some great information, or has further information on, and then that would then go straight to the link. Or the link could be part of that sentence. It doesn't need to go with that. So again, we're bedding it with some context on the page. It's not just a link that's sitting there that we don't know why this has been added or its relevance to the context is what there. So we're giving people some meaning and some action as to what this link is. And the link is still enough if the link comes up for a screen reader. It's saying what is employment rewards for dairy farming and the model code of practice. Without that being too far. Yep.
Okay. So the second example, so the context is this link provides an interactive farm to fridge game for young children and a range of other resources for primary and secondary students, added to highlight one method of educating children on farming practices. So the link itself is a fun interactive game for students to learn more about the dairy industry. So with this one here, again, as Darren was saying before, we can copy the name of a resource, and I can change my, sorry, it's hidden there, edit hyperlink. To the name of the resource, I'm just going to leave that as all capitals at the moment. Actually, no, I won't. Sentence case, and then again we could include that in a sentence. I'm sorry, Darren, I've gone all blank.
That's right. And this is the thing about editing other people's links. When you're putting them yourself, you can know why they're there. So this might be Dairy Australia has a great resource has a great interactive resource, the Fridge to Farm Interactive. Yep, which is available for.
Oops.
Yep, which is available.
Yeah, if anyone,
which is aimed at educating. So again, the context of that, which is aimed at educating. Secondary school, primary and secondary school students on dairy farming practices. You need to change that link. Alexandra, you've got your hand up.
I really like what you've shown us. The only question I have is, I know this is for accessibility and I know everybody benefits, but because it's relatively a new style, what has been others' experience of, because I'd like to put this in my teaching resources, but what do others who have used that, what's the experience like? Will they recognize that it's actually a URL? I know it's underlined. I'm trying to change my colleagues understanding that we've got to stop underlining stuff because that's now an accepted way of showing that there's a link. But some people are still doing it with headings. What's others' experience, or what do you
So
think?
look, this is part of, descriptive links and meaningful links is part of the WCAG standards for web accessibility. So it is sort of the standard for doing things.
Which standard? Which standard?
The WCAG, WCAG 2.0, I think it is that we're, or 2.1. Can't remember which one we're adhering to.
Someone could write that out, because I will use that as, I will talk to my colleagues about this. Okay.
Yeah, 2.1. Thank you.
Thanks for that, John.
And yeah, and so it's important for all users because it gives that context and an understanding before going to the link. And so, you know, in terms of a student accessing resources, it saves time, it reduces cognitive load and being overwhelmed with resources.
I really like it, because what I find myself doing is writing an explanation about the link and then putting in the link. But this is kind of better, isn't it? It's more streamlined. It's more sophisticated. It's good. I love it.
A bit more conversational. So when you think about writing some of these links, it's a way to think about it being conversational, where you go, so if you were to go to this website, you'll see that there's this, without telling them the link directly. Like, you know, no, I love it.
It's
particularly important inside learning management systems, and you may have, many of you have probably seen this. It just looks like a whole bunch of links. Well, why are they here? What do you want me to do with them? And why did you put them there? You may know why they were put there. It may have been mentioned in a lecture, but I'm now going back in week 6 and looking at week 2. There's just a list of 7 links that are just long URLs. They're not even descriptive of what they are. So I don't know what anything is. I can't find anything. So I've just added to that cognitive load. I've got to go through them all again. There was something in one of these weeks, and I've had students give up after an hour, 2 hours of trying to find something from a few weeks ago, or even from last week, because it just gets lost.
I agree, because Swinburne's just launched a new wiki for our resources, and it's been formatted so badly. I spent a couple of hours yesterday just trying to find something, you know, and that's bad. Anyway, I better let others have a turn.
That's all right. Shaz, you were next, I think, in my list.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So I, at my institution, we're using Canvas, and I have a legally blind student, which I'm working to make everything as accessible as possible for him at the moment and for everybody. However, the immersive reader, and we've been using a narrative style approach for URLs for a long time. However, the immersive reader just reads it as text. And I mean, he has an education assistant who works with him, but it won't pick up that for him to understand. Listen, I've just heard that there is a link that I need to be clicking on, when all we are stating is the narrative style of approach, which, you know, as I say, we're using left, right, and centre. But I guess my question is, how does he know there's something extra that I need to be clicking on now?
Oh, so it doesn't announce the link? Is that what you're saying?
It does not announce the link.
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Nor does it announce images, by the way. I did ask the question before. If I've been using alt text, and for some of the activities he's doing, he actually needs full big descriptions because the activity is actually around analysing the image. So I've done that, and it is reading it, but I actually need to state in my alt text an image of, because the immersive reader will not tell him that he, you know, there is now an image being, you know, coming up.
And this may be sometimes, you know, part of this may also be limitations of the tool again. So there's no one tool that's going to do all of these things. Immersive Reader has its setbacks or drawbacks that are there at the moment. While it's getting better, it's still there. If the student's using a screen reader, then they'll probably be working directly with the Word document, or as an alternative of what's there, so that you know that these things will be getting announced and doing that. Or better still, if this is there as a HTML page, you know, and the links are following on, you know, with the AT, etc. Look, it's a very nuanced question. I understand.
Yeah, okay.
Depending on there, but look, we've got some options in that for follow up of some of these questions later on as well. But thank you, Shaz. Helen, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Shaz has raised kind of what I was asking, but I was asking is, how would the embedded link read or be read in using assisted technology? And I'm not familiar with assisted technology at all. I know, I'm aware that it's there and I'm aware students use it, but that's a whole nother thing I've got to learn. And that was my question, like, how is this, is this happening? Does it then open the link, or does it then, does it tell the student there's a link? And what I'm hearing now is no. And then the other part of my question was, if we were to then, we've prepared this document and we've provided it in PDF, the link is obviously not going to work in a static PDF, or if a student prints it because they prefer to read off paper. So where would we then put the link? I kind of like the way you had it before with the context. This following link is about this, but then it also provided the URL for students who may need to enter it later because it's not actually hyperlinked.
Yeah, look, again, yes, it does. It's another one of those nuanced questions, because there are multiple ways to do this, depending on what's there. We're going probably in this sense, we've gone a bit more along the, certainly the web content accessibility guidelines of putting that in. The link itself will read out as the text that's there, not the underlying URL, but it will read out as a link. So the link is an employment and rewards, in this case for dairy farming, which gives much more nuance than the link is http://www, and it just reads out a long string that means nothing, because you don't know why this is actually there. So putting that in again, it's a quick way to find the article that's there. You can, again, putting that narration around that, or that bit of extra context there, it certainly helps. Again, most resources we say to be used digitally, and you can let people know if they want to print it out then. And I don't know many people that are putting in long string URLs and typing them in manually from a printed document. You go back to the digital document and click on the link. Especially when a lot of things were coming from third-party resources or from peer-reviewed things, etc. Through the libraries. Some of those are links that are extremely long. Nobody's typing in all those characters to get to a link. You'd be using the digital asset for that. So I don't think there's much of a need now for long-winded stuff. For short websites, maybe visit the Australian government site, www.gov. Whatever that might be, and you can put that in and still announce that.
Awesome.
Sorry, somebody jumped in then?
No, sorry, that was someone behind me.
Checking on you, Justin. Yeah, look, it's there's lots of ways. This is certainly the way that I for these things happen. Again, the student may just need some of those listed as full URLs as well, and there is a way to deconstruct the URLs inside documents, but that's another story as well, into full written ones, etc., depending on the tool people are using, but we can go over that as later.
And also, Darren, following the sort of best practice guide and doing it in the descriptive way will work for most circumstances, but there might be reasonable adjustments and things like that need to be made for an individual student, and that might be that you then pull out the URLs from each of those and provide them as a appendix or something like that, which does print. And as Darren said, if they want to manually type them in, they can, or they can go back to the document and access it. But yeah, this is generally the best approach for most circumstances.
So there's another few links on the page. Sorry, just very quickly, Carly, you've still got your hand up. Sorry, I almost missed you there.
I think you've covered most of what I wanted to say, but I just wanted to reassure people that when you're using descriptive links in that way, they absolutely work. And if you've got a student that's struggling with it and only hearing the words, they're a novice and they're learning to use the technology, and it's their learning gap. So you may need to provide extra supports for them or direct them to your Access and Inclusion Support Network to learn how to do it. But it absolutely works. And the most common way people who can't see the links work is to bring that up in a list format. So you just have a list of basically dot points of every link in the document. So if it's not descriptive, it's much harder to find.
Yeah, extremely difficult to find. That's a really good point. Thank you for that. It can be overwhelming. Given as particularly as students advance in the years within the institutions to later levels and years, those lists of links become longer and longer and longer and longer. And trying to find something, it is, one student I remember saying, it was like trying to find a blue underlined needle in a haystack, because they were just referencing that's what it was, but none of them made any sense, particularly if you're going into research and journals, etc.
And look, someone in the chat, Darren, has said that about this benefiting everybody, and it does look accessible accessibility, there's a statement, useful, essential for some, useful for all. So it really is something that carries across to assist a lot of people in different, a lot of students in different circumstances.
And exactly. So I'll go back to that point I said, earlier, we're reinforcing context is everything. So putting these links in context and making the links meaningful unto themselves can be really important, even within like a learning management system where there'll be links off to other resources, external sites, YouTube videos, other videos to watch. Putting in what you want and how you're expecting people to engage with that is really important. Saying this video demonstrates such and rather, although it's the American principle for this, it still applies. Or watch the first 2 minutes, even though the link goes to a 50-minute video. I see this quite often, or an hour-long video. We really only want students to watch a couple of minutes, but we didn't tell them that. You might have mentioned that in class or during lecture or something, but it was never, added with the link later. So again, that whole, if I'm going back and studying or looking at it later, I missed the lecture, I'm doing it slightly out of the linear context it was designed in. It's very easy to get lost and confused, and it just helps every student know, why is it here? What do you want me to do with it? And what does it mean? That's there. So those can be quite useful. I'm very conscious of the time, and we did think we'd only get through 3, even though we added in tables to this, but we can kick off next workshop with tables that's in there. We're not going to go too in depth with those. We'll just really get stuck in people's heads, only use them if you have to, kind of thing, where tabular data is needed, but we'll get to those. But thank you everybody for today for this, and we'll just, if there's quickly some other questions, because I know we have to wrap up before we pass back to Darlene. I might do that now actually, but I hope this was useful for people for today. We've tried to cover a lot, I know. It can be confusing reading along, trying to work along with, but that's fine. Thank you for taking those first steps for those that are new into this space, and we'll just quickly throw a poll up for the end of this session while
and Darren, can I just add in there too that the fact that people are engaging with this and starting that process is the most important thing. The last 2 years for me have been a massive learning curve, and I've changed my practice several times during that. The fact that you're making a start and thinking about these ideas and how you can apply them is the most important thing, because you will find that you'll learn new things and better ways of doing things as you go along. I'm by no means an expert. I'm a constant learner when it comes to this, and happy to take advice from anybody.
Yep, and the other thing, I'll put something into chat while we're just answering that poll as I throw Darlene. There's lots of other resources on AdSet, and we'll have some of those we'll bring up in the next workshop, and we'll be on the web page with this on the AdSet website. But there's also AdSet Assist, which is a service AdSet offers, where you can book some one-on-one 30-minute sessions with myself. We'll put the link in for that. Yeah, on anything and everything to do with accessibility, some of the AT, because we know this is very nuanced. Every student's slightly different. Every case is slightly different. That's there. So happy to look and have a chat and see what solutions we can come up with for something you may be doing.
And I can say that I've used Darren's services a number of times, and they're very, very useful, especially with tricky situations.
That's fabulous. Thank you, guys. It's absolutely brilliant to have gone through all that. And as I think, as Justin, you experienced, we always learn something new. We think we know it all, and then go, oops, no, didn't know that one. So it's great that I also picked up some tips and tricks. An email will be sent out to you with the recording, and it'll also be available on the AdSet website. We really encourage you to share it with your colleagues. I know you can also play along again at home watching the video. I often do that, having 2 screens. So, which is absolutely brilliant. And the next one that we've got is Workshop 2, Accessibility Basics. We also have a number of other webinars coming up so in the future. So we've got Beyond Accommodations, Why Universal Design Matters for All Learners, and also Digital Math, the future of inclusion and how can we get there. We'll put those links into the chat. Also encourage, if you haven't signed up to our newsletter, please do. That's where you kind of find out all our new content and all our up and coming webinars to keep you informed. So thank you, Justin and Darren, but and I don't want to say it, but also thank you to everybody that actually participated in the chat and the conversation. It was great seeing so much shared learning with the whole audience. So that was a really added bonus to today. So thank you for those who shared their wisdom and knowledge so freely and also came forward with questions. As we said, there's no wrong question. So thank you, everybody. We look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you, Justin and Darren. And thank you to
Thank you,
our
everybody.
Thank you,
So glad
Darren.
to
Thank
see-
you, everybody.
So glad to see people going to use this in the next document they create. 80% of people.
Yes.
Oh,
Brilliant.
okay. So yeah, sorry. Darren, did you just want to talk through the exit poll?
Oh, sorry, just quickly on the poll. Yes, 80% of people said that they can implement some of the strategies they've learned today in their next document. So, or in the next week or two. That's 92%. That's brilliant. Thank you,
Awesome.
everybody. And look forward to the next workshop where we'll touch on a few other key things that are there. But yeah, the more you practice, the better we get at doing this. So thank you for coming along and taking part in this.
Hopefully we'll get to see you next time. Take care.